So, how are you? Nice to meet you.
Lovely to meet you too. I watched your the links you sent me on hydrogen. It was fascinating because actually it was so much in line with some of the things that I've been observing in water, especially some things you said around hydrogen being the atom of levity and oxygen being the atom of gravity.
Yeah.
And it's very much in alignment with some concepts I have about how the essence of spirit leaves the body. So when upon death, so there was a lot of things you said in there that started to build and make sense upon some of the things that I've been observing in water.
So you watched the whole thing?
Yeah, I watched all of them.
Oh,
And
wow.
I went on to watch the little link you put on about 5G because I've done some work with water and 5G as well. I don't know if you've seen them on my website.
No, I haven't.
So yeah, I did some tests where I got the spring water because I'm able to show what spring water looks like in its ultimate state of health. And then I kind of have gone down through the degradation of water. So it goes from like this ferny like hexagon, which water in its state of health always shows in crystallography, and then it breaks down to like a flower, to a leaf, to grass, to lines, to dots. So I took the dots, the kind of lines and dots are what tap water always present. So spring water taken directly from source will show these incredible hexagons, and the bigger the hexagon, the healthier the water.
Mm-hmm.
And so as it starts to go through right-angled piping, it starts to change and it degradates. And I've kind of studied and photographed what that looks like over and over and over and over again. But when healthy water in its pristine state is put beside we don't have, thank God, we don't have much 5G here in New Zealand yet, but I put one by a 4G tower with 5G capability for 15 minutes and one for 30 minutes, and it was structurally absolutely destroyed. And it's disturbing, but
Yeah.
what was encouraging, what I loved what you were doing was that you were giving people suggestions, really valid hope that there's things we can do to protect our body. And I like what you were saying about magnesium and what you were saying about the 8 hertz
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that frequency, and within meditation and understanding the connection between frequency and the hydrogen molecule. So all of those things were very encouraging.
I'm so happy you saw that because when I was listening, so basically I binged watched all your interviews. Not all of them, maybe, but most of them, right? 3 or 4 of them at least. Because you are channeling water. You are the voice of water, a water whisperer, as you're being called. I have not heard people communicate the voice of water as clearly as you do. And also, you're not afraid of going into the spiritual realms while you're talking about water. And I feel right now it's extremely important we are bridging the science into spirituality and spirituality with science. And I feel for me, right as it is right now, I don't see anybody with as clear a voice as you do with water. And so I'm excited. I'm really excited about talking with you about this. And I feel like if there was anything that I wanted you to hear from my material is exactly this 8 hertz, the hydrogen 8 hertz, unconditional love, because that for me is the scientific language to bridge spirituality into the scientific of why do we care about water, right? This is where it meets. Because now we are talking about you are becoming your own divine frequency antenna, and you can structure your own internal waters with your own consciousness. But it means you need to take responsibility for your internal environment, and actually practice unconditional love, not just for others, but also for yourself. And so for me, that's the message that I'm getting. So I've been obsessed about water for a long time, but that's what I got back from water is love. And you said like I was 20 minutes into the interview, I was like, oh my God, she's awesome. What is this? Oh my God, this is great. And then you said, yeah, water, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, love, blah, blah. Oh no, I mean water, not love. But it's like, and I was like, she got it. She totally got it. Because it's the same thing.
Of course.
It's love. If love have a form, it's this liquid.
Yeah.
And it's inside of us. And
of course.
yeah, so it's metaphorical, it's metaphysical and physical expression at the same time.
You know, it's so interesting because I have always been fascinated with the concept and the idea of what love is. What is love? And the older you get, the more experiences you have in the world, the more you understand that it's not attachment,
No.
it's connection. And it is this incredible...
It's not even an emotion. It's not just an emotion.
No, that's why I said connection.
Yeah.
And it is like this ultimate, it's not separate from you. And I have found that water has been my ultimate spiritual teacher. And that water truly is the word of unity, because it is what is in every living thing. It enters, everything in life enters through water. And everything about life exits upon death. And so you see water evaporate from a body, but you see water enter, and it always is the unifying companion with any kind of embryo, with any force of life. And that is the beautiful part, is that we're never without water through this life, and the life itself doesn't end. And so we just get so attached to the physical of the body that in fact we forget. It's like, you know, there's a very beautiful saying, and we've all heard it, that eyes are the windows to the soul. And with our 99% liquid water eyes, we're looking through into these beautiful black holes of our soul, into what's even deeper than that. Exactly. And it's incredibly deep. And I love to be able to bridge the science, which is of course there and interesting, and there's a new science of water. But then there's the art and the artistic expression, which is music and dance and form and shape and imagery and geometry and all of those things, and symbolism. And then also into the conscious realms, the spiritual realms, which are all like, water isn't, it's before the veil, it is the veil, it's after the veil. Yeah. And it's a very interesting and incredibly spiritual journey that just deepens and deepens and deepens. Yeah, absolutely. And also, you talked about water, you're learning from water. Water is the guru, water is the teacher. What is water teaching us? Like if I do this to the water, it now has all the information of me in there. So every water molecule is in unity consciousness. It's in constant contact with the Akashic field of consciousness. So everything knows everything about everything. And water is that super quantum living organic computer consciousness that holds all this information. And it's not personal, it's transcendent. So if we are 99 water molecules out of 100 by count, who are we then? And who is talking to who, really? Because there's a sack of water
in New Zealand talking to a sack of water in Ecuador about itself, and is fascinated by itself, exploring itself in its own mystical way, exploring and finding out, discovering itself, trying to find a deeper understanding of itself. So there's really no one here except water.
Mm-hmm. but see, you've got it. That's exactly it. I remember someone saying to me, what if water is expressing its consciousness through us? And I would take it further to be more in alignment with what you just said. What if water has taken form in the shape of every living creature to not only observe itself, but to push itself to see how far it can go, how extreme it can be, how loving it can be, to watch all its different emotions in the face of every different shape and form imaginable and even unimaginable to us, because we can't even know what we haven't seen yet and what we haven't been yet.
Yeah.
And so there is so much truth in what you just said, and I think that that's extremely profound.
Yeah, it's very rare I can meet anyone I can talk to like this about water.
Yeah, me too.
It's always some like holding back. But when I drowned in a swimming pool when I was 3 years old, and I came back with a lot of knowledge that I was not able to communicate because I was so little. But one of them was a deep fascination of water, and I knew I just came in. So I died 4 times. So I died again when I was like 21 and 27, and then 45, not 3-4 years ago. And the message was, every time when I came back, was like, water is the key, Joshua. Water is the key. You need to let people know about the water. The water, pay attention. It's the water. And I knew there's a big ascension process, awakening happening on planet Earth, and water is the key. And so so I came back with this, and I'm like obsessed about water, and I don't know why. Like, I'm just like, water is it, and I don't know why. And I was just like, well, I'm drinking water, but what else can I do? Like, what is up with this? But once I started actually going into it, it became my guru, my teacher, and I can see, well, it's teaching me about unity consciousness. It's teaching me about the origins of life, that life is surrounded by this, and that it's intelligent, and we are intelligent, and there is no person here. There's no individual ego, like it's just an idea. That's just a concept. And water, basically, you see these Darwinian evolutionaries where you see the fish coming out of the water, and then it gets legs and it can walk, and then it turns into a monkey, and then blah, 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 right? I just see water that goes up on land and just takes all these different forms and just say, here I am. I'm going to figure this out. Like, I'm going to see myself in all these forms, and it's just the same thing. It's just, it's all water, right? So water just at one point decided, hey, it's awesome to be formless and big ocean and all that stuff. But I think I'm going to individualize myself into all these funny forms, and then explore myself on land. I can go up on land. Oh, wow, that's awesome. Let's do that. And so it's this intelligence that is doing it. And actually, I mean, I have so many questions that I think actually maybe we should just keep on recording this and just
I think so. We've pretty much just launched into it.
We just launched this. Let's just give people the whole thing. And as it is, so welcome. I just need to tell, this is Veda Austin, and she's a water whisperer and mother of 3, author. I haven't even read your book yet. I haven't had the time. But I know it's going to be an epic book. I know this already because of the way you're connected. So, author, researcher, and totally switched on. She is like, for me, she's the clearest voice on water that I have seen so far. walking on two legs on planet Earth. So I am so excited to have you here, and I have so many things I want to talk to you about. And
I'm so excited.
And by the way, the listeners here, the listeners here, they're used to listening to me talk about this stuff. So we can really geek out. You don't have to hold back. This is not about, this is not your average crowd of people. You just open up the floodgates and give us all the juicy stuff.
Well, there's plenty of that. So I'm so happy that I get to do this with you, because what we were just talking about is one of the best analogies I've ever heard anybody say. When I go, I donate a day a month teaching to primary school students. So that's around about 8 to 10-year-olds. And I always say to them, if your skin was invisible and your organs were invisible, what would you look like? And because I'm wanting them to see themselves in a new way and to explore what they might think we would look like. And one child, he said, I would look like a brain-shaped cloud with rain coming down in the shape of a human. I'm like, wow, that's some pretty advanced thinking. Yeah. But every one of them always ends up coming back to they look like some kind of streams and tributaries, and they're able to see themselves as fluid moving systems. And it's so in alignment with what we were just talking about, because it's like water observing itself in all these different forms, and it's so unlimited, because we know more about space than we know about what's actually in the sea, for example.
Yeah.
There's so much undiscovered in the oceans that we just don't even know about.
Yeah.
And there's huge intelligence. Like, actually, we're so distracted with looking up. If we just look down into the ocean a little bit further, there's so much that we don't know.
Yeah.
So much we don't know.
And there's oceans underneath our oceans. Mm-hmm. So we not just have the oceans of the surface to explore, we also have the oceans underneath those oceans. Mm-hmm. And so God knows what's going on in there. Which
they say there's even more ocean in the Earth's mantle and the ringwoodite than there are oceans on the surface of the planet.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I heard a very credible scientist actually sit and say that. And so when I heard that, I was like, okay, we are definitely living on a water planet.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. So I hope you don't mind. We just go into the deep stuff right away. I mean, we are talking about water. Let's go deep, right? Let's go deep into the water.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
So this is just my personal opinions, okay? I can't back this up, but I heard you talk about that science. They're saying that the water came with the asteroids and stuff like that. How the water came here. Mm-hmm. I have so I believe that that's actually true, that it will come like that, but I don't think that all that water came from that. I think I just want to hear your opinion about it. Mm-hmm. So I spoke to Patrick Flanagan. He talks about the sun making, I don't want to put his name on what I'm going to say now, because I may say something that he didn't say, because I'm mixing things up very often. But light, the light from the sun, the photons. So the sun is a hydrogen star, and it's actually shooting hydrogen atoms to the Earth. And these atoms are somehow combining with the oxygen and creating water. So the sun's rays, the sun is actually creating the water on Earth, or at least it's playing a part in doing so. And then also maybe there's a chemical process going on in the center of the Earth that is also creating water. What's your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, I would be inclined to agree with that. But I think that there's a mix of things going on, because I think that there is water being created within the Earth, and they call it primary water. It's actually, a scientific phenomena whereby they're observing that there is new water that is actually being created within the Earth's mantle, and it bubbles up through these specific springs. And there's a man, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, that is actually a huge source of information about primary water. So that can be, if anyone's interested, go and look into that. But also, they were able to tell through the asteroids, meteorites that have hit the Earth, that it holds a certain amount of deuterium, which matches the amount of deuterium that's in the water on the surface of the Earth. So that's why they think that it came from asteroids and meteorites.
Oh.
So they were able to say, yes, that matches the water that's on Earth, which is why they think that around about 60 to 70% of the water that is on planet Earth and recycling around on planet Earth came from outer space. However, I think that there is so much we don't know about water. That is something that every scientist will agree upon. There is so much we don't know. It has all kinds of crazy anomalies, and it doesn't conform. It's the rebel element, and it doesn't conform to the laws of physics and gravity. But when I think about what you just said about the sun and the hydrogen mixing with oxygen and actually creating water, there's like a deep resonance that comes for me from that. It's not coming from any kind of place other than an internal knowing that that's somehow true.
Mm-hmm.
I can't prove any of that, but there's some resonance for me in that, because the sun is such a source of light and water and life just go together. And there is, water really is life, which there's a saying which I really love, which says, N-O water, N-O life. We all know that, no water, no life. But K-N-O water, K-N-O life.
What is that? Sorry.
So you actually know it. So the two differences in English, it's like, if there's no water, there's no life, obviously.
Yeah.
But if you know water, as in like, I know your name, right?
Yeah.
So you spell it differently. So if you know water, you know life. So it's more about that double entendre of understanding water, that if there is no water, then there's no life. But if you actually start to understand water and know water, then you actually start to have a deeper appreciation. You start to know life. Because if we only look at ourselves as just, when we're looking in the mirror at this very solid being, and this is me, and we make all these attachments to how we look and the color of our eyes and our hair and all this stuff that we attach to ourselves and all our labels, we are missing the fact that we're a cut away from liquid, and an emotion away from liquid, a toilet break away from liquid, an exercise away from liquid, a whole ton of other stuff away from liquid. We leak.
Yeah.
and so we are not so solid as we keep thinking we are when we look in the mirror with our fourth phase water eyes. We keep forgetting that we're a liquid, a very sophisticated, intelligent liquid system.
Yeah.
And Steiner says that all intelligence, nature is an intelligent system. All nature is intelligent. And actually, he says we pull our intelligence from nature. But then we are always thinking that we are so separate. But like you just said in the very beginning, when we launched into water, it basically expressing itself in different forms.
Yeah.
All water observing itself from different perspectives. And it is one of the most beautiful analogies to really ponder when you really start just looking, like what Bruce Lee said. He says, like, be like water. Water becomes the cup, it becomes the vase. But is it the vase? Oh, it's water taking the shape of the vase.
Yeah. It's formless, taking the form in any given environment. Mm-hmm. Which is and I'm teaching martial arts, and I always tell people, relax, breathe, relax, because water under pressure is not going to move freely, right? So it's all about to be fluid, going into the flow, being in the flow state. And so it is so, it's like, if you really start to looking at if you have water in your consciousness and you go and look at gardening or the art of conversation, or how to make your breakfast, like you can always apply the knowledge of water into the actions you do and how you do it and how everything. It's amazing. It is a teacher. It is the ultimate teacher in that sense. So,
but it's a funny thing because it's also us teaching ourselves.
Exactly.
If you can, and that's the thing. It's like we're so attached to the word us, and yet it is. It's like all of us experiencing, all of us already having a full awareness or understanding, but like having this ability to lose the memory and then remember the memory. And then when we leave the body, it's like, oh, that's right. You know, we are source.
Yeah.
Having its own expression and experience of itself.
Yeah.
It's so fascinating because because this is in a sense, like it's so nice to actually talk to somebody at this level, because to me this also makes sense. It's not out there crazy stuff. It's actually, you know, when I was a child, I was always interested in philosophy, what people believed in, deeper wisdoms and teaching and scriptures and all kinds of stuff. But my mother brought me up not religiously, simply taught me, don't judge. And so with that in mind, I just observed. And I always think of water as awareness.
Yeah.
And it's pure awareness, so therefore there isn't a judgment. It's the observer. And so it loves to observe, which is why it's in all kinds of forms, to also observe itself, given the fact that every single human being takes on all of these different energies that we're putting inside of ourselves in relation to food and water.
Yeah.
And then we have the free will and to think based on our upbringing, based on our environment, and then we start creating how we perceive the world and how we perceive ourselves from the moment that we're born. We start becoming a body of water memory.
Yeah.
And the beginning of this conversation is now a memory. We've recorded it, but it's a memory for us now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's more around actually creating the best memories in life that you can possibly be. So you're leaving the memories and others behind. That's your gift.
Exactly. You got it. And also, you said something very interesting. You said, here's what I'm telling people. I'm telling people, listen, you're God and you're playing hide and seek. You're just pretending you forgot that you're God. And so I'm sitting here telling you, you can't play hide and seek anymore. Now it's time for you to remember. So water can actually lose its memory and pretend it doesn't know, and then, but still primordially deep inside in its essence, it has the memory still. It never lost the memory. And we are in the process of bringing this memory back up again. Mm-hmm. So we are remembering our own essence, our own divinity. And it's not we are learning, we are remembering. So that's why they call it a realization, not something new that came to you. Mm-hmm. You've always known. And so when I hear about people say water, you can erase the memories in the water, I actually think you can't. I just think you can make it less dormant. You can make it maybe dormant, and you can make it so it is. But I actually think water in its ultimate state is every single water molecule is an essence of the Akashic records in a holographic sense. And so everything contains everything. And so it cannot lose memory at all whatsoever, but you can change the qualities of the memories that it wants to express maybe.
It's like there's a kind of amnesia that can happen.
Yeah.
And then it is a process of, we experience that. I've seen that sometimes with people that have slight concussion. That's happened to me, before as well, where I've been slightly concussed, and then slowly the memories start to come back, but they're a little fuzzy. And then there's the amnesia sometimes that we have of people that just, like, I know you from somewhere. It's like you. It's like, oh, you seem so familiar to me. I feel like I've known you for my whole life, but actually we've physically only just met.
Yeah.
But it's like, oh, you're so familiar to me. I feel like, we've known each other a long time. But it's like we just have this amnesia that goes on, but there's this innate knowing. There's this innate kind of memory that comes up and going, oh, it's connection.
Yeah.
So that's the key. It's like, if you're truly connected, the connection is actually always there.
Yeah, it's always
the connection.
Always been. You cannot not be entangled.
Yeah.
It's not possible. And so, And so this is the teachings of water we are talking about. So water is teaching us the connectivity. Water is teaching us about true intimacy.
Exactly.
True intimacy. So and now when we talk true, feeling intimate, feeling connected, water is the connection. And what is the first expression of this connectivity is what we call love.
Well, I think that also, love is a word that is used so freely, and love is a very deep thing. And I think it's not just a feeling; it is. It's just
it is.
Love is.
Yeah.
And so, just as water is.
Yeah.
And it is in many forms as well, but it still is.
Yeah.
And so, like, water is in a liquid, a solid, a gas, a gel, and various other forms. I am absolutely positive that there are so many more stages of water that are just simply unrealized. That I think we've discovered a liquid, solid, gas, and the kind of plasma gel that's inside of our cells through the science tells us that. But I do think there are many other kinds, and one of them I think is kind of a vibrational vapor that actually is the only way I've described it. It's the way in which I have observed when something dies. Okay, I'll get into this. So I found that there are two types of water in water. So there is what I would say the informed water, the water that doesn't have amnesia, and the water that is uninformed.
This is very interesting. This is because that's what sorry to interrupt.
No, it's fine.
But this is because I believe that, for example, inside your pineal gland and maybe inside the sacred space of your heart, there's this very, very fine, noble water that has...
Yes, that's where I'm going with this.
Oh, okay,
right.
sorry.
No, don't be sorry. We're just in agreement.
Okay.
And so on just the very simple way in which I'll explain it is that with the work that I do, and I guess we can get into that as well. Yeah. But
at one point, we're going to talk about your actual work.
Yeah, we will get there. But I work in crystallography, and my area of expertise is water research. But when I am going through the process of freezing water, and I don't freeze water completely anymore, I have observed that there are two types of water in water.
Okay.
And so the informed water, the water that has taken on the information or the influence just prior to the freezing, will adhere to the bottom of the glass petri dish very quickly, within minutes. And it starts to design. It uses water. You can use its building blocks of ice to create imagery relative to its last influence, which we'll get into soon. However, the more uninformed water, the water that hasn't received as much information, remains liquid for much, much longer. And so as the freezing process happens, they sort of separate. And I now get rid of the uninformed water, and I photograph the liquid crystal lattice, or the design that appears on the petri dish. It's very thin, but it's almost three-dimensional. and you get so much more light that comes through it, and you can see this, the designer has already designed within minutes. So and there was actually something, and so there's these two types of water in water that I observe, but I also think there are the two types of water inside people, and that this is where I was going with what you were saying, is that there is the noble water. I like the way you said that. It is the water that has the ultimate eternal memory.
Mm-hmm.
And it is essentially what we would term as consciousness, spirit, soul, subtle body, all these different kinds of things. It is the essence. It's the concentrated fluidity that is, which is like incredibly essential for us as human beings, individuals that we think we are. And that so that part, I believe, is one of the reasons that the yogic monks, the Buddhist monks, all the different people who have attained a certain level of meditation, they are able to use that essence, that noble water, and pull it into their heart space, whereby that is so intelligent that it can keep them alive without the need for all of the different foods and drink and all of that kind of thing. They're able to be there a long time, but the uninformed water is on autopilot. So it's always constantly kind of just moving, but the noble water is pulled in, and it's actually able to maintain the human body in a state of samadhi, in the state of deep meditation and connection with source. So it is constantly being fed. Yes, you can look at all the scientific aspects of how the body might be being fed, but essentially it is being fed and kept alive by the essence of that noble water. And then when that person is able to kind of come out of that state, the noble water actually starts to expand and kind of feed some of the rest of the body, so that then you're able to get up and you're able to start to maintain the body and come into a different space again. But I think a similar thing happens upon death. This is only my theory. I'm not claiming that this is true, and I can't prove anything, but it's always through the observations of water. So I observe that upon death, rigor mortis sets in, the body starts to harden. You know, I watched my mother pass away, and I observed this very interesting change that happens, whereby you see, once they've left, that suddenly this shell, it's a shell. It's like, that's not my mum anymore. Mm-hmm. And so when I saw that, and I was very observant in that space, because it's such a sacred time to be with someone when it's a time of transition. And my mother was a walking angel on the world, and so her essence essentially left very quickly. And so I have often observed, when something dies, it begins to harden, and slowly over time, the water evaporates, leaving nothing but dust and bones behind. Essentially, the salts are left behind and the water leaves. But I think that noble water goes from a liquid into some kind of vibrational vapor, which is obviously different, because to get vapor, we generally have to have water has to boil, and then it turns into a vapor. So there's another transitional phase. Perhaps it goes, because you were talking about hydrogen being levity and oxygen being gravity, and it moves so quickly. And I'm like, perhaps it transitions into hydrogen and it exits the body that way. I really don't know. However, I think that this kind of essential water, the spirit, is able to exit the body, and the bulk water remains, and if even that eventually is evaporated.
Yeah.
But everything to do with life, eventually the water will leave. And you see it, I watched one of your videos, I kind of binge watched you as well a little bit. And so you were talking about, and I do the same analogy, it's plums and prunes. You know, it's like, this is the state when we're born, we're this gorgeous plump prune, like plum. And it's like, you know, there's lots of water and it's hydrated and the skin is nice and taut and everything. And then as we begin to age, it's a slow process of dehydration. And then eventually the skin begins to change and it starts to resemble a prune. And it's not a bad thing. This is happening also in nature.
Yeah.
And with fruits and all these different things, they start to lose the water and the water slowly leaves. And then there is a transitional phase. There is a phase where two things happen. The water evaporates and the essential salts remain.
Yeah.
And I always find it interesting because I like the topic of salt as well. Salt essentially is a crystal. It stores information. Salt is in its natural state is like this cubic kind of form. And salt is a crystal, and crystals are now all our technology. They hold vast amounts of information. And there's no coincidence that we are a body of salt water, not just fresh water.
Yeah.
So there is this interesting marriage that happens between the informed salt, so water and salt. You know, they're two shapeshifters.
Yeah.
This is how I talk about it when I go into schools, is that water is the ultimate shapeshifter. It can turn invisible and then suddenly it can be in a different form. But salt too, because you can put salt in water and it's invisible, and then the water can be evaporated. Oh, the salt's still there.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because when somebody is cremated, the ashes are actually salts.
Yeah.
And so the salts essentially also don't die, and neither does water.
Yeah.
And so if that's true, then are we really dying? If we are essentially water and essentially salts, that's actually truly consciousness, water, salts, minerals is what this human body is made of. Does it die?
It doesn't.
So it's just in different transitional form.
It's just changing.
And changing form.
The alchemical. This is what the alchemists are looking for. They're looking for the alchemical process of life and death, and it's right in front of their eyes. It's right there. You can see it in a glass of salt water. You evaporate that, and now you've been told the secret.
It's actually very deep stuff we've just kind of quickly gone over. And when you think about the sun, because you've brought that up, and so many, it's considered to be so sacred in so many ancient cultures as well. Is the salt. Sorry, I'm going to have to just turn my phone. It keeps going and going over here.
I just want to say something about salt, and you can tell me if you resonate with that or not. So salt is like ocean, sea salt, for example, is 92 or more different minerals of those we know. Then there's the trace minerals and all kinds of things and plasma, and so there's a lot more going on than just these 92 minerals, right? Mm-hmm. But let's just take those, and each mineral, it has its own frequency signature, vibration, light, and when it enters water, this is my own interpretation, I see this kind of star like the water molecules inform themselves around each mineral and create this 3D star cluster matrix around this one single mineral ion, and around each one of them. And so if you imagine there's 92 different psychogeometric patterns expressed in just a simple sea salt water. Mm-hmm. and which is inside of us. And so we have this blueprint framework of psychogeometric patterns of of water, salt expressed in our body at the same time, which is why we are not freshwater beings, we are saltwater beings. And so this is just more into the crystalline nature matrix of our existence, and that's how consciousness operates through it, because it's this framework and how it expresses itself through it.
And even in nature you see this. All streams, all rivers, they all lead to the ocean. And so we're putting the fresh water in, but actually it's all leading to source.
Yeah.
You know, everything's leading to source, and ultimately we are also a body, we are also an ocean in the form of a human being. And so everything is, you know, it's like the water within us and water within all living creatures, which essentially need fresh water to live. That fresh water is always attracted to source. It's always attracted to going back into source. And then it's so interesting that the two separate upon death. And so that they can go back into the search, into that ultimate search for each other all the time. It's so interesting because there's a love affair. It is in fact the ultimate love affair.
It's the love affair. It's the Shiva Shakti.
Exactly.
And that's the sun and the earth. It's the Father Sky, Mother Earth, and it's the cosmic dance. And we are the conduit in between, and we're playing in between this divine matrix. And so I'm so I wish everybody understood how important it is to approach life understanding this as a reality. I think it's so important because, I mean, we go to the toilet, we just poop in fresh water. When we wash the dishes, we don't even notice it's water. It's just, you know, and it's like our relationship to water is so unconscious, and which is also, for me, you know, if you are unconscious with water, you're unconscious with your own water. And how can you bring conscious awareness into this planet, which really need it, if you don't relate to it like more consciously? And so if we're drinking deteriorated water, like water that is angry and has bad information, how are you going to be expressing anything good into the world? Like, so by changing our relationship to the water, I mean, we're entering the age of Aquarius. So it's kind of like in the stars that it's time to wake up to this liquid marvel, mystery, and not solving the mystery, but becoming the mystery, to live as the mystery. And so, yeah, I wish everybody knew that how important water is. And when I tell people water is important, they look at me like, what?
It is interesting, you know, in the very older times, it's even in our language. Water used to be referred to as the waters. It was revered as body of water. And then when the age of plumbing came, and water closets, toilets, and all these kinds of things, water was reduced to just water. It was called water. And then now we've kind of reduced it again down to H2O, and I think there needs to be like this renaissance of water appreciation. But the word "the waters" has actually managed to keep itself sacred in one area. When you say her waters broke,
yes,
as she's about to have a baby, because that is a type of sacred water, and it's called the waters, her waters. And so there is some memory of our through language that we have kept. However, I do think that it's very interesting to observe that as water started to become seen more as just some convenience to get rid of waste, that we started to actually, even the words that we used around it became less and less and less and less, and reduced and reduced and reduced and reduced. And now we see it as, you know, as oxygen and hydrogen, and we're separating this couple. And it's a very interesting thing, because then it becomes the masculine and the feminine is separate rather than the masculine and feminine together.
Yeah.
which is very, very sacred.
Yeah.
This is the life. And so I think with even, I mean, there's so much that you can look at where water has become more and more separate to us. So when we drink a glass of water, we don't ever think, oh, that there's some information there, that's something special. Even in the food, there's still water.
Yeah.
You know, I was in my very first, one of my very first inspirations to start the journey of water that I've been on was when, so I'm a water researcher and I research some obscure, crazy stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm guided along this journey to be introduced to some of the most profound minds, actually. They're often just not known about.
Yeah.
So there was a radionic engineer in the earlier part of the 19th century called Thomas Hieronymus. And he was very interesting. He went to a Parisian meat market and he observed something which was extremely intriguing to him. He observed that the freshly placed organs of an animal seemed to be affecting the way the frost froze on the glass behind them. So, for example, the heart organ appeared to be affecting the way the frost froze behind it. So the frost actually took the shape of the heart organ. The same thing happened with the liver. The same thing happened with the brain. And in his opinion, he believed that life force energy, even though the animal was dead and dissected, that the life force energy was still emanating out of the fresh organ through the blood, the water in the blood. And there was a liquid communication that was actually happening between the cold air and the liquid water, and that somehow there's a liquid communication going on between the two. And he said that as long as the water is there, the energy is there, the life force energy is there, which is a very interesting concept. And so I went on to, obviously, you know, people had, well, not obviously, you can never assume anything, but Masaru Emoto, his work came out, and obviously science kind of slammed him and was like, well, you know, we can't double blind prove any of these with any studies and this and this and this. But
I just want to say, I know somebody who knew somebody who was part of these studies. The Emoto, he was very, very selective in the people who were allowed to actually even do these experiments and like handle the water. And so if the people who couldn't repeat those experiments, it's because these people polluted the waters with their consciousness alone. And so it's a very it's a whole new frontier. You need to actually, it's a quantum physics. The observer is influencing the experiments, the results.
Well, I actually just interviewed a friend of mine on my own channel who was directly taught by Masaru Emoto as well through to be a Hado instructor. And he said that because people would say, oh, well, how come you can't get the exact same geometries from the same emotion and the same word and, you know, all this kinds of things. And quietly, more off the record, Emoto was saying that we're just not at that level of consciousness yet. If your level of consciousness was actually so evolved and at a certain level, you would actually be able to get the same results repeatedly. He said that we're just not there yet, which is very interesting. But however, mainstream science just wasn't prepared for that concept quite at that time. But what I do think Emoto really did bring to the world, because his work was so well loved, because it was so visual, and we are such visual beings. And so people were able to look at his work as a representation of this is what water, how it perceives love, and this is how water perceives hate,
Mm.
and in contrast. So it was one of the first times across the world where people were able to finally associate themselves as water beings and understand that words create imagery. And so through a form of art and photography, people were very touched and very moved by his work. And he opened the door to the concept, really. And I'm not talking in the science area, I'm actually talking about a lot of people, the body of people on the planet that were open and interested in his work on a conscious level. They were able to actually start to become very aware, because of his images, of the words that they said, and the symbols were important, and they're starting to become mindful of water and the water that they drank and how to treat it. So it was a wonderful kind of opening that I saw happen around me. And then I also have another friend of mine called Laurent Costa. He's a French photographer. He works in the same kind of way as Emoto did. But what was fascinating about his work, and I actually have his book, and I'd rather be able to show you. Hopefully I can do this without dropping everything. So Laurent, he wasn't just photographing water in contrast with emotion or words or music. He was photographing water in imagery. So he's using a microscope. But the photos that he's taking are not of geometries, which is what Emoto was getting. His photos were of imagery. So his book is called Journey into the Heart of Water. And you can see that, this is the cover.
Oh, yeah.
And so he was getting imagery like hearts and fish and faces in microscopic photographs of water. But and his water was also, he was looking at it with ice.
Mm-hmm.
So I started to cotton on that the way in which water, like kind of where you can start to see its intelligence, where you can start to see what it can do, is as it becomes in form. So there's that word is very powerful. It's like, if water is the ultimate awareness in its fluid state, and ultimately it's also in molecular chaos when it's there in a glass of water, because it's updating its information every trillionth of a second in this kind of chaos.
Yeah.
But as it is cooled, it starts to slow down and become more ordered and more. It starts to take form. Yeah. So it's absorbing information in its kind of crazy, chaotic state. The information is there because it's moving so quickly. Imagine how much information it can absorb with every molecule moving so fast. And then it comes and it begins to slow down. And essentially, ice is termed as a mineral because it actually has the same liquid crystal kind of lattice as a crystal does, which is why it's called a liquid crystal, because it's molecularly ordered and structured and in uniform. And so, but as it begins to freeze, it starts to be able to share that information. So it becomes it's informed in a crazy state, but then from that information, then it can also become in form as it takes form and shape and design in ice. So water is the ultimate architect. And this is what I'm seeing from both a scientific point of view, an artistic point of view, and a conscious point of view, because I think the three interweave so beautifully, whereby now with my work, I'm able to see imagery in ice, not microscopically, but macroscopically. And what is so important about that, because I mean, I essentially, yeah, I'll just sort of start about some of my work so it starts to make more sense to the viewers.
Let's see some of these. Okay, maybe could we just quickly go through you? So you had an accident.
Mm-hmm.
You had a healing story with
Mm-hmm.
water that kind of catapulted you into beginning to explore this much deeper. And then, so if you could share that story, and then show us the images, because those are incredible.
Sure. So yeah, about 25 years ago, I was in a horrendous car accident in New Zealand. We went under a 7-ton truck, rolled twice. The driver was decapitated, one of the worst accidents in New Zealand where someone survived. In fact, a friend of mine watched it on the news without realizing it was me, and he said he could not believe that anyone could have survived the car accident. The car was completely destroyed.
You were supposed to.
Yes, absolutely.
I think the water was not ready to let go of you yet.
Yeah, it had other plans. Mm-hmm. So I had 8 operations over the course of 20 years. Most of them were for bowel surgery because the seatbelt cracked my collarbone and crushed my internal organs and left scar tissue on my small bowel from the internal bleeding, and that grew. And so for an entire year after that accident, every time I would try to eat food, I would be vomiting and vomiting and vomiting. I'd end up back in hospital, and I'd be on an intravenous IV drip, and then I would become better because my body didn't have to digest anything. And then I was sent home, and then I'd try and eat food, and then I'd be back in hospital. It was actually, I didn't like eating food because it was like having to go through labor every time I ate. Eventually, I had a bowel resection, and scar tissue grew back, had another bowel resection, had other operations for other stuff, most of it car accident related. And then on my 8th operation, after the bowel surgery, the doctor said, look, you didn't recover very well, and you now have showers of blood clots in your lungs. I'm like, oh heck, I mean, I don't drink, I don't do drugs, I don't smoke cigarettes, I've been vegetarian since I was little. I live a holistic life, and I'm like, what? And so there was this resistance to having to be on warfarin, which is a blood thinner and essentially like doubles as a rat poison. Yeah. And they fed me the fear of if you don't do this, you're going to die. And so for about 6 months, I was on warfarin, but I really was in a lot of resistance to it. And then they would have liked me to probably be on it for another few years, if not my entire rest of my life. I ended up talking to a friend of mine who is a medical doctor but practices Ayurvedic medicine. And he said, look, totally off the record, if you can find yourself a high natural source of alkaline water, emphasis on natural, not ionized, nothing machine made, he said, nature knows best. Mm-hmm. And he said, that might be able to help to just stabilize the acidic condition, which is what happens when you have blood clots. So we have all these buffers in our body to maintain the pH of our blood. So we have a very sophisticated system that enables our blood pH to stay very stable no matter what we put ourselves through. No. So there's this big blanket statement out there that alkaline water is going to stabilize, like up your pH. And a lot of people don't actually really realize that that's not what's happening. Actually, our body is a very sophisticated system that all these buffers are maintaining our blood pH. But when you have something like blood clots, then your blood is starting to create something called rouleaus, which are essentially acidic, sticky cells, and they start to clump and stick together, which is the reason we have blood clots. And that's what had happened to my body. And so my body had tipped more, and the pH has started to lower of my blood. And so I'm like, okay, well, if all I have to do is drink an alkaline water, that's got to be better. Let me do that.
Yeah.
And so I started trialing myself on 8-week trials of different waters with a pH, which stands for the power or potential of hydrogen, which was over a 7.5. So essentially the scale goes from 0 to 14, 0 being the most acidic, 14 being the most alkaline. Distilled water is a 7, which is the midpoint. And so and anything over a 7 is considered to be alkaline. So in New Zealand, our average tap water is around about a 7.3 to a 7.7. So we have slightly alkaline, even just tap water. But I wouldn't recommend tap water because it's usually has fluoride and different kinds of nasties in it that we don't want to have. So I started drinking water with a pH of around about a 7.8 to an 8.2 and all kinds of variations in between, thinking, I don't really notice anything, but I didn't know what to expect, because when you're drinking something, you kind of expect to perhaps feel more hydrated and everything's flushing through. But outside of that, we're often not used to water being a medicine. So we don't have much to expect. We don't know what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, somebody said to me, listen, I know this guy. He's got his own private water source. The pH out of the ground is 9.9 naturally.
Wow.
And he's only giving it to cancer patients. And maybe you want to try it. So I was like, heck yeah, sign me up.
Yeah.
So I go and see this guy and tell him my story. And he gives me a month's worth of water. And after 3 days, I noticed a really big change in my bowel motions, which a lot of people don't even want to talk about, because it's like, it's talking about going to the toilet. However, it's a great sign of your internal health. And so many people are dehydrated, sitting on the toilet, trying to push a pebble out for an hour. And this is just not normal. We are actually designed in a much, to actually excrete 2 or 3 times a day.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be painful, and it shouldn't take ages. And so I'm like, okay, because after all that bowel surgery, you start to notice a difference. And then after 10 days, the more dramatic thing happened. I started to get all these bumps along my arm and along my jaw that were really painful. And I knew my body was sort of detoxing something, but I didn't know what it was. And then one of the bumps was so raised and so sore, it was like so painful. I ended up got some tweezers and started digging my arm, which sounds gross, but actually I pulled out a green shard of glass. And from day 10 to day 12, I pulled 27 pieces of glass out of my arm and out of my jaw that were predominantly green. And they were been embedded in my body for over 20 years from the car accident, because the man who was the driver who died, he owned a nightclub. And in the back of his car, he had crates of beer that were called Steinlager beer, and those beer bottles are green. And so when the car rolled, outside of the windscreen smashing through me, I had gone like this, and when we rolled, a lot of that green glass smashed. And so the brunt of it went through my arm and in my jaw. And so I'm picking all this glass out of me that had been there for over 20 years. And the only thing I'd done differently, and I was mindful of this because I was the guinea pig of my own health, and I was mindful not to change my makeup, change my diet, change my routine. The only thing that had been different was the kind of water I drank. So I was very, very interested to observe that it wasn't only glass that came out. I actually, when I was a teenager, I had this kind of big bit of, like this big thorn, a very large thorn that had gone between my knuckles. And we thought we'd got most of it out. But after drinking this water, and like all kinds, it was so gross and amazing at the same time.
Yeah.
But this bit of like fossilized, like wood that hadn't been able to all the way come out started making its way through my knuckle as well. So it wasn't only glass, it was fossilized wood too. And
that's the things that you can see, like
yes,
so much else.
exactly. And I often think, so I had a wellness center at the time, and I thought, well, if it's doing this to me, I wonder what it will do to other people. I was very inquisitive and wanted to see if it would help others. So although these trials weren't clinical, they were still done as scientifically as I could. And that I had people on 8-week trials. They drank a litre in the morning and a litre at night of this water. And every single person across the board, from extremely healthy and very, very fit, running marathons, doing all kinds of different training, to extremely unwell and a whole heap of different things in between, everyone noticed the difference. From the very healthy to more energy, from the very, very unwell to transformative healing. And across the board, everybody noticed a difference in their eyesight, which was so fascinating to me, because one lady actually had to change the prescription on her glasses because her eyesight had improved so much. And if you consider that the eye lens is 99% highly structured water, and as we age, what happens is that our body is so intelligent that the kind of water that we talk about, structured water in the body, but if it wasn't for this ordered, structured water that surrounds our DNA couldn't coil. And it's extremely important, the kind of water, this ordered water within the cells that, you know, absorbs light. So the more light it can absorb, the healthier it is as well. And it has negative charge. And anyone who has diseased cells tends to go into a positive charge rather than a negative charge. And you observe this in different people with different diseases. And so anyway, it was very interesting to start to see these changes in people, and but your body will pull. It's so intelligent that it realizes you don't have to see, but you need your heart and your organs, everything need to keep working. So it will intelligently pull from the highest source of structured water in your body, which is your eye lens, which is why we start to lose our eyesight as we age, which is very interesting. And so I started to go, oh, their eyesight's improving. That's so interesting. And people were losing weight because we have fat to trap acid. And so people are drinking all this water trying to lose weight, wondering why they're not losing weight, because they're drinking mostly acidic water. And this water was kind of going and acting like a water blaster and actually helping to flush the retained acidic water out of fat. But also, before doing that, it helps the body come into a balanced state. And so then the body can start performing and functioning properly. But firstly, most people are dehydrated. Most people just don't realize why they have a little slight headache a lot of the time. And it's usually just simply dehydration. Yeah. Because some people just think, oh, water's so boring. I'd rather I'm drinking, I'm having Coke, I'm having juice, I'm having this, I'm having that. But just they think, oh, water's so boring. But when you actually start to become cleaner in your eating and cleaner in your lifestyle, you'll notice water actually has different tastes and different textures, and you can start to understand and see the differences in water, because there are differences in water in the way and in its viscosity and all different kinds of things and the subtleties. So I started to observe all these changes in these people. I'm like, okay, there's something special about the water. And then I started to look at the analysis, looking at what's in the water. And over time, I began to understand.
You analyzed the water from this man's property?
Yeah. So, he had his printout of how much total dissolved solids, dissolved salts, and how much this and this and this, and all the different properties of what's in the water. And it had a high bicarbonate level, which probably has something to do with why it was so alkaline. But aside from what's in water, So that's the other part where you separate the two. Water is always hungry for information. And so water starts picking up information the moment it becomes a snowflake, for example. A snowflake isn't pure water. It has to have some kind of bit of dirt to like build around. So it's always getting information from somewhere to create and design. And so I started to see that water itself was holding information. It was holding salts. It was holding what it picked up. Okay, that's what it holds. What about the water itself? What information is there? And so I started to see things slightly differently. Obviously, there's the new science of water out there that talks about water being able to store and hold information. But I was also very interested in looking further into what Tesla says about if you want to understand the nature of the universe, look into frequency and energy and vibration. And I started to see this water held a certain energetic vibration. And I often look at what shatters glass. And when one of the first things that will conjure up in somebody's mind is an opera singer singing a really high note to break glass from sound.
Yeah.
And so I started going into this investigation deeply, like how could the water possibly get rid of all this glass out of my body? You know, how is this possible? And you can't just look at an analysis of water to understand that. You actually need to start looking much, much deeper.
Yeah.
And so I started to look into this and started to realize that we have like an orchestra within us playing. Everybody has a slightly different song, a different orchestra. Everybody's got their own people in there, so to speak, you know, that have all these different instruments playing. And I realized that by drinking this water, suddenly I had like an extra player in the orchestra, that this missing piece, this one in which suddenly was able to change my entire frequency, my song essentially. And it was to the degree that it literally recognized that when you change something to a different frequency, suddenly it started to recognize the foreign objects in my body. And it's like, okay, there's no room for this. But not only that, they repelled each other like magnets. It pushed them away. And so there was a very significant but subtle, and the power is always in the subtleties.
Yeah.
And nature hides her secrets well.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a very distinct shift and change in my vibrational frequency that I believe that this water, once it entered and mixed with who I was as a person as well, I was able to work as a healer, work as a medicine, and work as a sound, like, because we don't think of water having sound. We don't think of water in that way. We don't think about that until you start thinking about what makes the sound. And so every time we speak, every word we say, every time we feel even, we are creating vibration and movement. Mm-hmm. And so once the water interacted with me as a vibrational being, then it started to be able to work with me and work with my energy and with my vibration and help to shift me, because I needed that healing. I needed that water. It was like water was able to actually show me something so profound that made me look into it from a different perspective and look at myself from a different perspective. And so then I started to observe there's two things, what's in water and water itself. And so when I come back to looking at water in memory, because I was like, wow, how did this water have this much information? How is it so intelligent that it was able to actually go in there and force these bits of glass out of me? How was it able to heal this person's eyesight? And how was it able to do this and do this and do this? But I think there is also the connection the connection that happens between the water and the person, and where that person is at, because we are our own water structuring system.
Yeah.
Our own natural water system. And so
I can add in there and say they found out the heart is not a pump, and
yes.
and actually every time it pumps, it's making a spin
Spiral,
vortex.
yeah, vortex.
It's basically creating it's crystallizing. It's structuring water. It's a water structuring device.
Exactly.
And so it's very interesting. So yeah. So sorry, I just wanted to.
No. It's true, because a lot of people don't realize that the heart actually can't pump like how we think it does, but it twists and it vortexes the water and the fluid. And so I started to look into the work with Laurent Costa, and that's when I looked back at Thomas Hieronymus and what he had observed, and I started to look at Emoto's work, and I'm like, well, I really want to see for myself, if water can store some information in this way. So I realized the common link was freezing. And I didn't have a microscope at the time, but I had a glass petri dish and I had some fantastic water. So my idea was that I was going to imprint the water somehow, and then I was going to freeze it, and I was going to pull it out and see if it did anything. And that was my very loose idea.
Yeah.
And so I got a petri dish of water. I put some of the water into it, obviously. And then I noticed there was a bit of fluff in the water. So I was like, oh God. So I put my hand in to take the fluff out, really consciously thinking, oh, I wonder if my hand will have any impact on the water's memory. And so I froze it, and I kind of forgot about it for a while. I had zero expectation of what it would do. And then I was like, oh, that's right, I've got the petri dish. So I pulled it out and I held it up to the light, and I took a photo on my iPhone. And I'll just show you what I saw, because I can do a screen share on this, eh?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. You just need to, it says the host disabled attendee screen share.
I need to do what?
It says that you need to disable, so it's that you need to allow me to screen share.
Oh God. Oh my God. Let me see. Okay. We can edit. So
we can.
We can edit this out in case it's gonna take too much time. Oh my God, how do we do
Because
it?
I maybe go down to click on yours where it says screen share and see.
I found something. Make co-host. I'm gonna make you a co-host.
Do that. That will fix it. Okay, let's see now.
You're a co-host. Can you do it now?
Yep, that worked. Perfect. Okay. So, can you see?
Yeah, I think it's totally working as it should. Yes, I can see everything. I'm just wondering. Now I'm recording, I guess. Well, anyway, let's continue.
Well, that didn't take too long, so it was fine. Yep. So this was the photo in water that I saw, in ice that I saw. So it took up half the petri dish. And clearly it's a hand. And I said to my son, Rama, I showed him the photo I took. I said, Rama, what's this? And he said, oh, it's a hand, Mum. And I was like, it really is a hand, isn't it? And I was like kind of freaking out at the same time, because I wasn't expecting that.
So my analytical male brain wants to ask a question. How big a section is this picture of the entire?
It took up half the petri dish. So essentially that we use centimeters, and I'm going to show you. Okay, here's a ruler.
So half the petri dish looked like this, basically, like that hand.
Half the petri dish. So essentially, the petri dish, the actual hand image itself was about that big.
Yeah.
When the petri dish is about that wide.
Okay.
So it took up half the petri dish.
Okay, good.
And
so because if this was like, let's say, a 2 by 2 millimeter area of space, then maybe you could have found many shapes and forms in the same petri dish and just kind of like trying to find the hand. But when it takes up half the petri dish, then I think the conversation is over.
Yeah. Well, as I started going forward, I started including petri dish in the photos. And so as you go through my book, The Secret Intelligence of Water, you'll see more and more. I actually zoom out so you can see how big, and they do vary in size. Okay. Some are huge, some are medium size. You know, they do vary, but a lot of them are not so dissimilar from the size of the hand. So this was my first photo that has inspired now over 12,000. It was 10,000, but it's gone up to 12,000 photos of water responding in this very intelligent way. So the next idea I had after seeing the hand, I ran down to the beach because I thought if any water is going to be informed naturally, it's going to be seawater. Yeah. And I didn't want to influence the water. I wanted to see if something had already influenced it. So I got a very thin layer of seawater because salt water freezes slower than fresh water. And this is the picture that I got in the in the ice. And so you can clearly see the tail of the fish and its fins and this perfectly round eye, but you'll notice this feathering as well, which is more indicative of seawater. It creates slightly different patterns. So then I wanted to use different influences, and over the course of time, my technique changed. So this and this were both frozen solid. These are frozen solid images. Compared to these two, which are now using my new technique. So for this is really showing a much deeper type of intelligence. This is my friend Wendy. So I used her photograph and I put a petri dish of water on top of her photograph for 30 seconds, froze the water, but not completely frozen, using that technique I told you about where there are two types of water and water. Yeah. And this was the imprint of Wendy's photo. This is Igor. I took his photo from the water conference I went to last year in Germany. He was interested in my work, didn't mind me using his photo as an influence. And this is Water's depiction of him doing exactly the same thing, 30 seconds of the petri dish of water on top of his photo, froze it, and you can see his features compared to her features. They're very clear, they're very different. So I wanted to start.
So whoever is listening, next time you see one of these water geeks put their glass of water on top of a flower of life symbol, keep this in mind.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So I wanted to look at complexity. So this is from a photograph of my daughter's French braid that I did. And this was her idea. Let's take a photo of my French braid and see if water can mimic it or show what it picks up. Wow. So from an artistic point of view, I worked professionally as an artist for nearly 12 and a half years. And so even from an artistic point of view, painting a braid is not easy. You have to get the shading right. Everything has to come together in a very specific way. But you can see that water has designed, it's almost like you can see the hair threads. But this was liquid water when it went into the freezer.
Wow.
That's
no coincidence. You can't recreate that.
No, and the consistency of my work is actually where even like a lot of people love to immediately go, oh, that's pseudoscience, that's nuts. But I'm not trying to tell anybody it's science. But the scientific part is the body of work, the actual consistency in the 12,000 photos that are doing this. So anybody could say it's a coincidence, but there is so much work, so much consistency. It cannot be a coincidence. So I have been well, my friend and mentor is Dr. Gerald Pollack, and he is the world's leading water scientist. He's been kind enough to really give a beautiful review about my book, actually. And he says it's now up to us as scientists to discover just how this is working. So I like that. He said, you have discovered something profound. It's now up to us to figure out how it's working. So this is a funny story, this image, because I go to a cafe that around the corner from me quite regularly, and they have a dog bowl, and there was this schnauzer dog that looked like this that was drinking from the dog bowl, and I'm like, in my head, I'm like, oh my God, imagine what that water, what that memory has. And so I said to the lady working at the cafe, I said, oh, do you think, I know this is going to be like your weirdest request ever in the history of ever, but can I take some of that dog bowl water home? And like, she like looked at me like I was absolutely crazy. But she knows what I do, so she kind of, I just said, oh, it's for, you know, for some of the water work that I'm doing. And she's like, oh, yeah. So she put it in the takeaway container for me. Anyway, long story short, this was the image in the ice.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So the dog information had been shared with the water through its saliva. And this is really amazing.
That is
but then to see that it's not only for dogs, my cat influenced this petri dish of water. This is Jiva, my cat, and he was actually looking at the water, and this is the result in the ice. You can see his two eyes and his little nose and his little mouth and his ears.
So he just looked at the water?
He looked at it. Yeah, he didn't even drink it.
Wow.
I actually, sometimes I leave petri dishes out when I, so some people from around the world, sometimes they send love thoughts, prayers, different things into water petri dishes in my lounge. I leave them out for a period of time so lots of people can influence the water, and then I photograph it to prove that water can be remotely healed. But I have to make sure my cat Jiva isn't around, because he will go and drink from it. And so that happens too many times.
But cats are great healers, so I don't think it's a problem.
No. But I just wanted to keep his influence out of it just a little bit.
Yeah.
So anyway, so no, he simply was just looking and observing at the water for a period of time. So then I like this picture because I don't know if you've watched it, but there's this video on Netflix at the moment called My Octopus Teacher, and it talks about this man who had a journey with an octopus and created a relationship with him, or her, sorry. And so you can see that this was the influence was the picture of this octopus, but you can see that the water is picked up too and added in a friend, which I love.
I mean, out of trillions and trillions of potential images you could get, then getting some stuff like this, and you have like 12,000 images like this.
I do.
Yeah.
And I can't put them, well, I could put them all in a book, but I've just put as many as I can because it's a lot for people to take in and comprehend, but they're also pieces of art. You know, this is water as creating imagery, which is relative to what we can associate with. And this is another example. I took Van Gogh's sunflower picture and printed it out.
Wow.
And put the petri dish of water on top of it for 30 seconds. And you know, you said something really interesting in one of your talks where you were talking about how the brain dips every 30 seconds into that alpha state.
Yeah.
And I'm like, everyone always says, why do you only to put the petri dish of water on top of it for 30 seconds? And I'm like, it just seems it's like a sweet amount of time. It's enough time for me to set everything up. It's quick. It could be less. I don't think it has to be even, because water is so fast how quick it picks everything up. But it's that 30-second thing that kept coming up. That 30-second thing was like, and when you were saying that, I was like, oh, that's interesting, because that resonated with me with the number that I'd chosen for the time frame that I leave the petri dish on top of the photos for. But I don't just use photographs, I use words as well. So I wrote the word artificial intelligence, and I put the petri dish of water on top of the word artificial intelligence, and this is the result that I got in the ice.
You can totally see, you can totally see. I mean, it's just so clear.
It's very clear.
Yeah.
And I actually, although this is a disturbing photo, it is a very interesting observation, and kind of reminds me of Elon Musk's Neuralink that he's trying to put in people's brains and stuff. You know?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. This guy should have a little talk with you, I think.
Well, then so this one you can see the actual test itself. So I wrote the number 4, and you can see in the ice the number 4 there.
Wow.
So it's very simple. And then, I mean, you only asked for a handful. I actually, in the back, I have many more pictures, but you asked me for like only a few. So I just put together a few for you, but there's so many.
Yeah.
For this one, I said shalom. So this is spoken word. I said shalom.
Wow.
And this is the image that I got in the ice. So,
okay. Have you tried to put a cross under, or the word Christ or something?
No, I have done repeat studies whereby so I have many different types of influence, and even that word is wrong, because it's like sounds like I have so much control. I'm influencing water. That's so egotistical, because water simply is choosing to play with me. I'm the lucky one. But one of the other ways of other influences is that I put water in front of different media. So I've put water in front of different movies, and one was the Passion of the Christ.
Yeah.
And I put 3 different petri dishes, and every single one formed a perfect cross in them, which was very interesting. So it picks up on different things.
When you put it in front of media, what do you mean? A CD or
Oh, look, I sounds kind of crazy. Okay, so I've got, I don't know if you can see over here. I've got like my TV over there.
Yeah.
So the couch is right in front of it. I line them up on the couch, and they watch movies.
And then you watch the movie.
Well, I tend to leave, because often, I don't want to be too much.
So you're letting the water watch the movie, and then you freeze it.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that is so brilliant. It is awesome.
And sometimes it's in front of my computer, but I like. And so I've done so many different ones. I've done Batman and Jaws. I've done. And they're all in my book, but they're so clear, and they're on this other one. I can show you after this if you want me to. So anyway, so this was the spoken word. So I said shalom, and this was the image, and you can, and that's the other thing about the imagery, is that it's artistic. So it's like you can take from it what you feel most resonates for you.
I wonder how the Gayatri mantra would express itself.
I have done that, and I'll share that with you. I mean, I've done the sound of Om. I've done someone who's doing throat singing. I've used a Tibetan singing bowl. I've done the Gayatri mantra. I've said my own Sanskrit mantras to the water. There's no limit to what you can do. It's actually more around like making clear decisions about what you're doing and why you're doing it, and to make sure that there's no expectation of result, because that is the key. Water isn't a resource, it's a relative. And so in fact, it's all about relationship. If you don't form the relationship with the internal waters within you and the waters outside of yourself, the two are not communicating properly. So there is a relationship that forms, which is why children can do it so much easier than adults, because the adults tend to have such a conditioned way of thinking and questioning, and expectations come up and all kinds of things happen, whereas the children are like, oh my god, this looks like so much fun, let's just do this. So in my book you'll notice that a great deal of the photos were actually performed by my children.
Okay.
So I asked water, do you know who I am? I asked out loud, I said, do you know who I am? And this is the result I got in the ice. And this is exactly how I link my initials together in real life. Like, this is actually how I do it. And I'm like, oh my God. You know, because like, every now and then I have these moments of freaking out, going, this is kind of freaky.
Yeah,
And
yeah, it is.
But water gave me the new and improved version of my initials.
Wow.
And then,
with when you say, so okay, so wait a minute. So you're talking to water. You're asking, do you know who I am? And it tells you. It basically says, yes, I do. Kind of.
Yeah.
In its own way, right? And so I'm just okay. I'm again in this. Now. I just jump into this dualistic worldview because I'm thinking, is that piece of water you just spoke to is its own individual consciousness that is sitting there and has its own identity, and then it talks back to you saying, yes, I know who you are, and all. But on the other hand, it's actually just unity consciousness saying, yes, of course I know myself. That's what it is.
But it's interesting because there are many different ways it could have chosen to answer that question.
Yes.
And it didn't have to come in the form of
initials,
letters.
No.
And it's very interesting, the choices it appears to make, because it is a choice. And one thing I've observed, because Jerry Pollack suggested to me to make my work as scientific as I could, given the context, to do repeat studies and to remind people that unlike the work that Emoto was doing, they took many, many photographs and chose which ones to show. Whereas I am doing this generally in my lounge, and ice begins to melt very fast. So per petri dish, I'm taking 1, maximum 3 photographs before the ice starts to melt. So this isn't me choosing the best images. This is me showing the images as they happen in real life.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, if it's done this so intelligently and artistically, with this photograph, my mother passed in 1999, as we mentioned. I'd mentioned her earlier, and I said to Water, "Can you connect to my mom?" And I used to live in Japan, and this was back before we had emails. And so my mother and we would write letters to each other. And at the end of every letter that my mother would write, my mum would attempt to draw a circle, because circles never looked like circles. They always looked like misshapen rotis. You know, they were never really, she was not the best drawer in the world, and she never could really do full circles, but she gave it a go.
Yeah.
And she would do a circle with a heart in the middle. And so this was the image that Water showed me. And actually a year later, I asked the same question and I got the same response. But it's always as if there is different artists designing the same image. So they're never perfectly exactly the same, but you can see that the image is in fact the same.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a different designer. It's like a different artist. So
that brings me to, so the ice, the freezing is a way to stop time. You're freezing in time, kind of. So you could say that there's many images expressed in the water at all times, but then you're freezing, and then the most predominant image will start showing itself, right? And you're freezing it, and so you're frozen in time. But that also, like, so if water says water is in contact with your mother, so water is beyond time, space.
That's why that's such an important picture.
Yeah.
Because you're so onto this, is that's the key. Not only that, but water appears to be able to show things that have happened in the way past. So I went and I collected some water from a spring, which is right beside an area where there was a lot of Maori settlements. So here in New Zealand, my father's Maori, and the Maori have been here for quite a long time, hundreds of years, before the English came, and there was a whole change that happened, which I won't even get into. But the Maori settlements were there, and they used to have these things called pātaka, which are these Maori food storage huts. And they were built on stilts so that the animals couldn't get in. And they would store food there. They would put water in gourds sometimes and store them. And so I got some spring water, which was part of that land mass area, which was there. And I didn't influence it intentionally. I simply froze it. And I got one of the most, actually, one of the most sophisticated images. Sorry, I'm just coming out of here so I can show you. I want to do this. I'm just trying to pull it so it's doing it. Okay, screen share. Here we go. So this is the pātaka, and this was a sketch of the area where I got the water from.
Wow.
So this is what they look like. So this was what the water showed me. This was over 100 years ago that these were built, that these were on that area of land that the water ran underneath.
Yeah.
But the water seems to have, because you can see the second one in the background over here, has so clearly picked it up.
Yeah.
Showing something from over 100 years ago very, very clearly. What's very interesting is that, in fact, I have now, I don't always ask water anything anymore. And what happens is that sometimes I'll just kind of just put it in the freezer and see what it wants to tell me. Okay. And what I will see is that sometimes I will pull the dish out, and I'll see something that looks like something. And one of them, for example, was I pulled one out, and it looks like an obelisk, a clear obelisk in the ice. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I don't know why that's there, but yeah. And then about 4 hours later, a girlfriend came over, and she'd just bought a crystal, this big crystal in the shape of an obelisk. And she's like, oh my God, look at this. I'm like, well, look at this. The water just showed me what you were going to show me.
So it also looks into the future.
Yeah. So I see this regularly now. In fact, before I went to the water conference in Germany, I had an image come up of a plane and a heart and this like little kind of thing that looks like a magnifying glass. And it was like almost like a reading of saying that I was, following my passion going overseas and on a plane. And it was, I think when you start seeing water in this way, you start to realize that there is so much more than we could ever possibly imagine, so far as not only intelligence, but wisdom, innate knowing and understanding, acceptance, and unity. And I do this thing now where I'm starting to collect things what I term as hydroglyphs, which are essentially ways of...
Hydroglyphs?
Yeah.
I like it.
So it's where, because I do a lot of repeat studies, for example, you can see that water is very intelligent. And I might share it with you. It's somewhere amongst it all. But so, for example, water, the word love, for example, the word love. I don't think, am I screen sharing or not? I can't even tell.
You're not screen sharing.
No. Okay, so I'll screen share this. So the word love always forms and shows hearts, which is interesting because that's what we as people think of when we see a heart, we tend to associate with the word love.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not, it's because it seems that water's just chosen a symbol that we most relate to. So these are when I've projected the emotion of love into petri dishes. So always I see a heart. So okay, love equals the shape of a heart. The ones at the bottom are when I've projected stress into a petri dish. So always stress equals these spikes.
Yeah.
And so then I did, although it's not on this one, but I can share it and you can share it later. I wrote the word heartache. And what I got was spikes with a heart on the top. So what I had intelligently put them together. And so I have 25 words that I now have, because I've done so many repeat tests that I see the same symbol coming up, same image coming up. I'm like, okay, that means that word.
Yeah,
so I'm starting to literally read water through crystallography.
Wow.
And I think I want to stress, though, that it all comes back down to relationship.
Yeah.
And innocence, in a way.
Yeah.
Because I have had this, it was traumatic for me, and I'm sure traumatic for the water, but for a short while, I did some work for some people, and the man was very kind of scientifically minded, and he was like, I don't understand how this is working. We've got this scientist coming over from Canada. You know, he's doing some other work for us, but I want him to work with you for a week. And he's got this lab. I want him to try and do this and see if it's real, you know. And so the scientist was very sciencey, very mainstream sciencey, and he was like already thinking this is rubbish.
Yeah.
No matter how many photos he saw, it was like, yeah. But he said, well, firstly, you can't be part of this, because if you're probably influencing the water. Even by saying that, it's still acknowledging that something's happening. But
Yes.
anyway, so I wasn't allowed to be part of it. I wasn't allowed near the lab at all. So he had this idea. He had this clean lab, like it was totally sterile, quite small. He had a laptop set up on this thing where he would push it, and it was like just randomly get images. And so it would stop at an image, and he had petri dishes lined up in front of it, and then he would freeze them, pull them out, and see if anything happened. And day after day after day, he said, nothing, just random lines, nothing. I'm like, I was feeling like so bad for the water in this horrible environment with this man that just thinks it's all bollocks. And it was just like so. And I was thinking, this must be what it feels like to be some kind of like an animal in a lab, just being treated for like, I started to feel worse and worse and worse and more for like pain for the water going through these experiments. And I don't like the word experiment, because I'm a body of water that does not want to be experimented on. So I call them co-creations. And anyway, at the very last day, this man rings me up. He says, well, there's a very clear image in the ice. I'm like, oh, okay. He says, yes, it's undeniable, even for me. I'm like, okay. And he said, but it looks nothing like the picture on the screen. I'm like, okay, well, what's on the screen? He said it's a heart organ in one of those, you know, stainless steel bowls with blood everywhere and stuff. I'm like, oh, okay, well, what's the image of? And then he sent me a photograph with a photo of it. It was like a perfect circle with two eyes, a little nose, and a sad face.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh, never ever allowing that to happen again.
Yeah.
You know, it shows, it's almost like water saying, where's your heart?
Yeah.
Like, what is this? Why are you doing this to me?
And this is the core of the issue of science, because science does not acknowledge consciousness. And science, a long time ago in ancient Atlantis and the ancient Egyptians and all that stuff, science and spirituality was the same thing, because spirituality is science, and science is spirituality, and you cannot divorce these two things. And that's why science is only like, I always say, a half truth is a full lie. If you only get half the truth, it's a full lie. because you only get half the image. You only get you can only acknowledge half the existence of reality. So it's and on the other hand, I would also say spirituality very often becomes ungrounded and very fluffy, pink, rosy, completely out of touch with reality, and then it just turns into nothing. And so I think spirituality needs this grounded approach as well. So I think these two, science and spirituality, really needs each other, and we need to bring this back together again.
I think so too. That's why they say sage to science. These are very interesting things that are being put out by people, where they're starting to like mix the new science with old wisdom. And I have a friend at the moment that's organizing a water kind of collaboration of people from all around the world that are introducing scientists in the field of water with indigenous elders, and they're sharing wisdom.
That's
because
good.
they actually overlap. If you are able to find the language to communicate with each other, then you can find and see that there are definitely, the more you look into it, the more you start to see that there is this marriage, and there is the ability to intertwine new science with old wisdom. And I think we're also in a new age, so there are new things coming out, and I don't believe that it's a coincidence that water has now chosen different ways to be seen. And it's almost could be an advocate for nature as well, because through this work you're able to see that there is actually a voice, a communication, an intelligence that can be not just felt, I suppose, but seen in a physical aspect. And I'm often reminded of the book Charlotte's Web. And I don't know if you've ever read that, but there was a spider in the book, and there's this pig that is very intelligent, doing all these very intelligent things, and the spider is trying to basically save the pig in a way. And so the spider intelligently creates and designs words inside the spider, in her spider web, to get the attention of people. And so it's almost like water has also found a way in which to communicate and get people to go, what? And stop and go, this was designed by water?
Yeah.
And Jerry Pollack suggested to me that I actually do a survey a couple of years ago. So I put 25 images together, and I wrote on it, I said, what does this image look like to you? And I gave it to friends who put it out through social media. No one knew what the images were made of. They didn't know who put it out there, anything like this. I had, within 3 days, 297 people had filled out these forms. And I had over 85% of people could recognize the images for what they were. And there were 3 or 4 images where 100% of people could recognize them. If you even just look at this as art, even art can be misinterpreted.
Yeah.
This is water that has designed these images using its building blocks of ice. This is amazing that 85% of people could have image recognition of this work.
It's undeniable scientifically.
So how it's working, I have my concepts, which I'll share with you quickly. It's I can't help but feel that it's like it's as if all the water molecules, the what I term as the informed water molecules, are working as a collective. So they're working as a collective, like pixels create a photo. And so it's like they've all kind of working as a collective to create imagery together on the surface of the ice, a lot like pointillism in the art, the design. There's lots of little dots, lots and lots of little dots, but they started to create shape and form.
Just like on the computer screen here.
Exactly, the pixels creating the, sorry, my phone's going crazy, the image. And so there's no, we're looking at a liquid crystal display.
Yeah,
liquid crystal, right?
Yeah.
So it is no coincidence that for me, water is able to intelligently design through liquid crystal, because crystals can store vast amounts of information, and if it's a liquid crystal, it's in its fourth phase, so it is essentially in form because it holds information.
So my question to you is, hypothetically speaking, if you were the ambassador of the voice of water, and you had the attention of the whole world, what do you think water would say to humanity right now? What would be the message?
I think water is the unity that we're all looking for, because it enters the body of an ant as easily as it enters the body of a homeless man or a king or a saint, and that it knows no color, it doesn't know any religion or any culture or any separation. It is the transparency that we all wish that we could be as a people, which it means that we are open, we're clear, we're honest, we're true. It is the ultimate love because it doesn't judge. And I feel that it is also not only who we are, but our ancestors, our children, our life force, our environment, our planets, our stars, our universe. Understanding that water is life, it is everywhere. I believe that water is beginning to finally flow through us in a way where we can start to see that in actual fact, we are all water, we are all bodies of water communicating with each other. And that really, there is no need to fear death, because it's only a transition from this physical body. Truly, I think water is our true spiritual teacher.
Wow. Amen. For this, we've been talking for 2 hours now, and
oh my God. Okay.
I really would love to do a part 2 with you at another time, because I feel there's so much more we can cover. But I wanna stop with what you just said here, so people can sit with this in their hearts, and and bring this into life, bring this into conscious awareness. It is so awesome to finally meet a kindred water lover spirit.
I feel the same way.
Yeah, it's amazing, and I look so much forward to future conversations with you.
Oh, anytime, I would be honored.
So where can people find your book and your materials, your website, etc.?
Sure. My website's my name, VedaAustin.com. And there's lots of examples there, lots of videos that I've made. And you can buy the ebook there. And it's $12 US. So you can, it's only the ebook. I've actually just about to sign today with a publisher for the book, The Secret Intelligence of Water. So that will be able, the physical book will be able to be purchased at the beginning of next year. So
Okay.
I'm excited to see that. I'm always reminded of when Michelangelo was asked, what inspired you to create the statue of David? And he said, I saw the angel within and I carved until I set him free. And that's what's sort of happening with this book and this work.
This is awesome.
It's
You're doing very important work, much more important than many people realize. So I'm gonna spread this into you far and wide as much as possible, and let's keep our voices going. Let's keep the communication. Let's keep this song going. Let's let the singing continue.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Bye.